Emma Tenayuca is not a household name, although she helped shape the rights for modern-day Mexican Americans as a labor activist. She came from a time where these citizens had very few rights and were treated in no way equally. It was her grandfather that helped shape the woman she would become by staying up to date on local news and attending rallies. She was no stranger to hardship, and she became a strong voice among the Mexican-American population during the Great Depression. Hardship and injustice were her motivation, and leadership was her gift. She was utilizing these gifts as early as 16 when she helped in some of her first rallies. She was an inspirational woman who made her voice heard in a time when not only Mexicans were treated poorly, but women. She did this in a time that predated Cesar Chavez and the Civil Rights Movement. Her path was in no way easy, but like all the great people of our time, she persevered. Emma Tenayuca was born in 1916 to a large Catholic family in San Antonio, Texas. For most of her younger years, she lived with her grandparents to relieve the financial burden of her parents who had 11 children. Her grandfather was responsible for shaping the person she was to become. When the Great Depression hit, times were difficult for all workers, but much worse for Mexicans. At 16, while still in high school, Emma began organizing workers, and by 1934, at age 18, she had already helped form branches of the Ladies' Garment Workers Union. This same year, Emma organized a strike by Mexican women workers at the Fink cigar factory of San Antonio and was later arrested for doing it. During the Fink cigar strike, Emma Tenayuca met Mrs. W. H. Ernst and formed an organization for the unemployed workers called the Workers' Alliance. 3 years later, Emma was General Secretary for 10 chapters of the Workers' Alliance. Emma Tenayuca and the Workers' Alliance protested the beatings of immigrants by the Border Patrol and fought for a minimum wage, for the right to strike, and for equal rights to immigrant workers. She's probably most famous for her work as an organizer of the strike of the pecan shellers. At the time, San Antonio had a huge industry for pecans. The workers hired were mostly Mexican and were being paid 5 cents a day to work from sun up to sundown. When the workers were threatened with a 50% pay decrease, Emma Tenayuca decided it was time to do something to help them. She organized a strike of 12,000 workers to stop production until negotiations were agreed upon. This caused a lot of hardship, and the strike lasted about 2 months. During this process, the workers were threatened, and tear gas has even been mentioned as being used to scare them into giving up. They arrested over 1,000 strikers in the process, including Emma Tenayuca. When threats and attacks no longer worked, the companies finally decided to let them keep their jobs and their wages. It was a bittersweet victory because 1 year from then, they would be displaced due to machinery taking over most of their jobs. It did, however, make a huge impact on the future of their civil rights and was the beginning of the end of their abuse. I believe her actions were driven by need for equality and fairness. She helped to enforce a fair work environment for workers of all races. Before her time, it was actually illegal to go on strike, and police could and often did use force to put an end to this disobedience. She was frequently in and out of jail for her rallies and speeches. On one occasion, she actually invoked the anger of some 5,000 rioters, including members of the Ku Klux Klan. She was a person you either loved or hated, but you heard her name. This was a woman who, in a time when no one wanted to hear a Mexican or a woman, she couldn't be silenced. She fought for fair pay and working conditions to all citizens. She was a hero among her fellow blue-collar workers. She continued to fight injustice her entire life and had numerous achievements. A woman who they attempted to erase from history continued to be noticed and remembered. She paved the way for others who may often be more remembered, but could not have achieved as much as they did without her lifelong dedication to her cause. Her enemies threatened her and her very life, but in the end, a greater good was accomplished. This was said of her in her eulogy by Carmen Tafalla. La Pasionaria, we called her, because she was our passion, because she was our heart, speaking out at a time when neither Mexicans nor women were expected to speak at all.